There are, however, also arguments or debates around DNA profiling. Okay, so the first thing that they say is a very small segment of DNA sometimes is available. Okay, so if you have a very small segment of DNA available and it is analyzed, okay, that you might not get a very good pattern. Okay, so now the thing is, the patterns formed can be queried, okay, or questioned. Okay, so sometimes there's really a small section of DNA that is available. We replicate it and we use that. Patterns are formed. You are able to still make a DNA profile, but is it enough information to be used conclusively in something like a paternity test or in biological evidence, things like that? Okay, another thing that is a debate around DNA profiling is that of human error. Okay, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, but again, police or forensic investigators will tell you that DNA never lies. Okay, if you do a DNA profile and if you check it with a suspect, the DNA can only be matched to something that you have as a comparison, okay, or it can be used to say, okay, well, this person's DNA is different to that person's. But the DNA itself is not really sometimes the problem. The fact that humans are involved in processing the DNA leads it to sometimes be contaminated. Okay, sometimes it might not be contaminated, but people do the incorrect procedures or processes. Okay, or processes. And then you might actually not contaminate the DNA. You might, for example, incorrectly interpret it, or the biotechnical process that you use might be compromised. Okay, and now suddenly you can't use that anymore as evidence. Okay, another thing that is a problem with DNA profiling, not only is the human error an issue, not only is a small segment of DNA being used sometimes, which questions whether or not this is a valid thing and a conclusive piece of evidence that you can use, but it is also very expensive. Okay, so there's a whole lot of money involved. You're paying for the reagents that you are using, you're paying for the agar gel, you're paying for the lab, you are also paying for the lab technician who is doing this and facilitating this process. Okay, so that could all incur costs, which eventually leaves this process being out of reach for some people. It might be something that some people are not able to do because of the expense linked to it. And then the last thing, which is a very definite debate around DNA profiling, is that personal information, okay, might be exposing, or exposed rather, okay, with individuals. So when you do a DNA profile, you will be able to determine things like HIV status. Okay, you will obviously be able to look at things like, is the person male or female? Okay, so sometimes just those two examples are good examples often of prejudice, if we think especially in the workplace. Okay, HIV status is something that people do not have to legally disclose. It is something that is, there for you to know. If you offer this information to your employer, it's out of your own free will. Okay, so you are not obliged, you are not legally required to volunteer this information. Okay, and if in a DNA profile, okay, this information becomes available, then one of the arguments or the debates revolving around doing a DNA profile is that this might actually prejudice the person in one or other way. Okay, on a similar kind of a sense, males or females could be prejudiced in the workplace. So sometimes it's males that are, for example, going to be granted a job possibly before females, and sometimes it's the other way around. So the point is, any personal information, okay, which is linked to a person's DNA profile will also have to be kept as confidential as possible, unless it's possibly being used in biological evidence in a police case, okay? But it may never be used as a prejudicial tool against someone. But this is a reason why some people are hesitant, okay, to use DNA profiles. So I think an important thing is, again, with this section of work, okay, just coming back here, you have to know firstly what a DNA profile is. You have to know that it is a unique pattern, okay, that is made by looking at your DNA, and when you process your DNA through through the agar gel and using electrodes, you make very specific patterns. So knowing what a DNA profile is important. Knowing why we can use DNA is something that is very important. And then the work that we just had a look at now, the debates around DNA profiling would be a good thing to know and to study as well.